Good morning and welcome to Revenue Marketing Television, the video channel dedicated to thought leadership from the world's top marketing executives and thought leaders. I am your host, Jeff Pedowitz, President and CEO of the Pedowitz Group. Today's guest is Steve Farnsworth. Steve has over 14 years as a senior marketing executive. He's the Chief Marketing Officer of the Steveology Group, a content marketing for demand generation agency serving high-tech B2B organizations. Steve has worked with everyone from funded startups, mid-sized and large companies. He's worked with them to develop and implement multimedia content marketing programs that increase inbound leads and grow brand reputation. These programs integrate into existing activities and can form a foundation to launch new content programs. They're strategically designed to generate brand awareness, establish thought leadership, and build customer loyalty. Steve has been everywhere, moderating panels, speaking, managing industry events. He's worked with some of the world's greatest brands: Google, Intel, PayPal, Yahoo, Cisco, Adobe, Electronic Arts, HP, SAP, Wells Fargo, TED, Applied Materials, Symantec, NetApp, and Stanford on brand, social, digital, and content marketing. Steve, we're thrilled to have you on the show. Thank you.
It's great to be here. Great to be here.
So, first question, content, of course, has been around forever in marketing, but how is the role of content changing as it relates to demand generation in this modern digital medium?
So it's a couple pieces to that. So back in my early days, I started Marcom, and then was in public relations for a lot of years. And back then, this is even prior to the internet being anyway really related for delivering information to the masses. And at that point, public relations was very powerful for me because you learn how to influence the conversation about your product, or your product category, or the way your industry is seen, if you provide a good argument, good information. And so as a public relations person, I mean, that would look like creating white papers, doing news releases around that, or arranging for certain industry people to speak on that topic. And so it was the earliest form of providing useful information. People were buying stuff. And so that's one set of skills. But as now we're in a place where people can sit behind a computer, and they don't have to physically go someplace or read this long paper. They have to order it somehow, or get it mailed to them, or get it. And now people can sit down in front of a computer.
Okay, so as the marketer's role is evolving, what kind of skills do today's marketers need related to content that are different from earlier years?
I think, the modern marketer, for content and even beyond that, I think the content marketer needs the same kind of skills others need. And that's really twofold. One is actually better goals and better measurement. The better goals should have always been the case. We're pretty bad about that. One of the things that I work with clients, and they'll come in and they go, "We have this goal," and I go, "Well, is that goal, smart? That old, is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it aligned with your departmental or organizational goals? Is it realistic? Do you have the resources to be able to accomplish it? And the last one is it time bound? Is it time? So people don't always have that focus on the goals that they have, and they often pick goals that aren't very meaningful. Like, well, we want to get more followers for XYZ or something like that. And so goal measurement in better goals and measurement are really important because you need to be able to understand where you can deliver the content and why. And so, that's why I think analytics is just, you need to know analytics. I mean, I think almost every marketer should at least, or most marketers should at least know how to create a Google Analytics report. And this stuff is free. You can go learn this for free. And I think that, people like HubSpot have certain education stuff, I'm sure, like Eloqua and Marketo do too, where you can learn basic concepts of marketing automation. You should totally understand, what is an MQL, marketing qualified lead? When does that become a sales qualified, SQL, sales qualified lead? What is velocity, how fast it goes through the system? These are all these important concepts that I think you need to understand. So you need to have that. And the last piece of that is marketing sales language, I think comes in. You need to have marketing sales on the same page, connecting about how they're creating content and what that content is actually achieving, and then recording that.
Yeah, that's great input. So as it relates to organizing and staffing, are you seeing changes there? So the skills are growing and changing, but are marketing executives changing how they're organizing their teams related to content?
Not yet. There's unfortunately not as much as I think will happen. when you look at organizations that are smaller organizations doing content, while they have the flexibility and agility to do it, they don't tend to have the skill sets of maturity or just even the bandwidth of resources to really kind of pull it together. And as you get to bigger organizations, they tend to fall into these things where they're focused on, you have experts. So they start hiring experts in their field. And so the PR person comes, even if they all get together, the PR person tends to focus on the PR stuff, and the social media person focuses on the social media stuff and the demand gen and so on. And so you have this, even the editor who does a lot of the content, it really isn't tying what they do based on the analytics that tie into revenue goals. And so it's not quite coming together, and I think it's a challenge. There are people like Wolf, the CMO from, or actually CEO of MindJet, not MindJet anymore, Mozilla, and he's talked extensively about reinventing the way the organization looks. And I think that if you look at some of those models, you're going to see more flat organizations and organizations that are less siloed because everybody's being judged on the same thing and forced to work a little more in groups, as opposed to kind of as, Susie's over there in her office doing her thing and Bob's over there in his office doing her thing. That this should be great growth around it. But there's still, surprising, even though we're passing the hype cycle part of the content marketing, where it now becomes just kind of standard, most people are still not making that shift from traditional marketing, back when marketing was from the black arts, right, to this modern idea of using measurement and testing ideas, and also still make sure there's creativity involved in those technical elements. So it's not just driven by numbers and becomes this feedback loop. But we still have a long ways to go.
We do indeed. So you mentioned metrics. What kind of metrics should a modern marketing organization be able to achieve if they're using content properly?
What kind of metrics? Well, what should be the KPIs or the benefit?
Well, maybe what type of metrics and outcomes are associated with a good content strategy?
So the KPIs are, I'm a consultant, so the answer is it depends. But the KPIs are going to tend to be, it's good to collect the kind of vanity metrics about followers and shares and all that kind of stuff. Shares don't really reflect a lot of people who are accessing by phone. People don't share stuff that they read on their mobile devices. And so those aren't very helpful. So what people need to do is pick a KPI or a metric that ideally the metric would be closed business. That is really hard to do. You should track closed business from leads in back to closed business, but connecting the dots is difficult. So the KPIs you really want to look at are each part of the funnel. Do you how many people are downloading this item, and when they download these things, what else are they downloading, and are you doing things that meet that informational piece? So all into what you want a chain, obviously it's closed business, but since you can't connect it, what you want is a proxy metric, and that is what is something that people do that 85% of the time, or whatever that number is, they're going to do business with you. So maybe it might be a price sheet, it could be a demo, it could be a free trial offer, it could be talking to a sales rep. And so once you have those kind of sales proxies, then you can start looking at how you connect the KPIs to increase those numbers. In terms of what can people achieve, the reality is that getting eyeballs is super expensive. Getting the right eyeballs or this is almost impossible unless you are have a full level of activity. So you can do marketing activities focused just on straight lead generation. That means that somebody's going to sign up and says, I'm interested in buying your product. The scary reality for marketers is that there have been a couple different studies, and it depends on kind of who you look at, but by the time somebody raises their hand to somebody in marketing, they have completed 85% of their marketing journey, their purchase journey, 85% along the way before they ever talk to somebody and raise their hand saying, I'd like to talk about this.
60% was the metric that's been used for the last few years, so it's even more now that they're.
Yeah, I've heard 60%. When I've talked to people, that's not the number that people felt. I read a study about a year ago that had the 83%, which was the number, and I've actually not been able to find it again. But that's probably closer to the process, because if you think about all the things you can get, 60% would be nice, but I think that's the old days. I really think that that's what people used to do. But now I can actually become aware of your product. I can actually go look at boards and review places. I can query folks. I can search social media. I can download your stuff. And would I rather do that before you're over my shoulder calling me every day? Absolutely. So it is a much higher number than we think it is. So since it's that way, you need to have enough pieces along the funnel to lower your cost per lead. Because if you're paying, I saw one study, and it was for large companies, the average lead cost, closed lead cost like $129. And when you actually had a full content marketing program, the content marketing leads came in about $75 a lead. And so that is those numbers are always going to be a little different depending on the industry you're in and what you're doing. But that was over a 26-month study time. And so that tells you that you need to have a little bit of everything in the marketing process to bring down your total costs.
So Steve, what types of technology are you seeing that are helping marketers source, develop, manage, measure different kinds of content through the whole process?
That's a very complicated question. It doesn't have one answer anymore because there's so many pieces of software. We're getting into the age of a new concept which has only started really floating around in the last couple of years, which is marketing technology stacks, the collection of softwares you use through the entire marketing process. And it's incredible. If you from the early things you have, from Google AdWords to social Cision or Sprout Social, Moz for SEO, early stuff. You have Salesforce, Pardot, Crazy Eggs and Optimizely for helping with your conversion. You got nurturing stuff like AdRoll, for remarketing AdRoll and Google AdWords and LinkedIn, Salesforce, and then obviously for like web analytics, Google Analytics, Moz, and Meltweb, those kinds of things. So you have those are just, and there's more. There's HubSpot, and there's all these different flavors in that. What I just went through is a list of a marketing stack. It wasn't a complete list of a marketing stack for one company that I know of, and I know that so there isn't one answer anymore. It's just there's just tons of stuff. And so what's really going to be important, I think, is that IT people are great. God bless them, but their job is very specific around making stuff work. It's not necessarily about making more marketing work. And so marketers need to step up and be more technical. I think all marketers need to understand how to use Google Analytics. It's free to go get there and all that kind of stuff. You should be comfortable in just working with these technologies. But it's going to get more complex, especially as different people, like some people focus on each phase of the funnel. So you have a different application of marketing technologies that support phases along the sales funnel. You have others that focus on just one final goal. Now, they don't care about anything else, so everything's focused on that one thing. And there's several others, and these are radically different approaches to the way what software you're going to use. So it's an interesting time, and I'm glad to be a marketer. I'm glad to have come up in the days of our marketing when it was a black art, and now that it's technology, I find it really, really exciting. I learned the power of data when I first did 20 years ago, the first time I did direct mail, and I had an opportunity to, actually it's like 20 years ago, when I first did direct mail, and I could test out headlines, I could test out offers, I could see what worked. There was no longer this long conversation about people like going, well, when I get mail at home, I do this thing or whatever. And now but the client goes, I want to use this headline. I go, that's awesome. Let's test that out. Now I'm just going to put these other ones that I think probably are going to work better. And so that's a big shift. That's a big shift.
So who's doing it well? Can you think of some examples where clients are really doing a great job with their content?
Doing a great job with the content. There are some that are doing better jobs doing it. I mean, like G's done a really good job. I think PG&E, which is our power company, has done a good job. Making using content around their drivers and who their people are to really humanize the brand. So there are people like that. B2B has been somewhat more challenged, and I think it has to do with a lot of companies are still. When you're a consumer company, you know the consumer is the person in charge. When you're a B2B company, there's still, because it tends to be group sales, there are like 5.4 decision makers in every B2B sale, that it's not one person. They don't tend to think of these as human beings. And so they create this content, which is really, they talk about what they sell, not about what they know. And when you go online, you want to, if you're going to buy $10,000 or $100,000 or $1 million worth of software or goods, that's your job. Your job is on the line. Your livelihood is on the job if you make a bad decision. So people are researching the hell out of this stuff. And companies are still very me focused. here's what we think, here's what I'm about, as opposed to like, hey, you know what? We understand your pain. So let's give you some tools to help you do better in your job and educate you about the space so you make an informed decision. Because we all have those BS meetings. We know that when we read a press, no one, if anybody ever read a press release, you read it and go, what is this stuff? No one reads that kind of stuff. We know that when we see BS. We know when people are straightforward, it's logical, it's simple, it's clean, and it's engaging, right? And you want to read this thing because it's not off-putting. And companies are still, especially B2B companies, are having a really hard time. A lot of their content, a lot of content is created by. When I talk to CMOs, they have a great vision of what they want. But when you get down the line, someone's got to like come up with titles for the blog or whatever content they're doing. They sit down in a room and they generate ideas, in a black box, and that can't happen. That's what normally happens. You need to go out and talk to customers. You need to go on customer ride-alongs with sales. You need to take salespeople to lunch. You need to really be out there. And what are these people asking? What do they really want to know? And then you need to create content back. And that's just, that piece is still, for marketers, people are still in about, hey, let's go do a white paper. Done. White paper's done. Let's do an ebook. Done. We're done. And it's just, let's take those titles out. Let's do these big projects. And they're not going back and really finding out who we're really talking to. What do they really want to know about? And how do we dovetail our domain expertise internally and externally with their needs to have a conversation?
Great advice. So in closing, what tips would you give for today's executive that's trying to figure out how to get started with their content approach?
When I sit down with customers, the thing that is the most powerful to do is if I ask somebody, smart, well-paid, bright people who have more degrees than I've ever had, and sometimes they go, well, can you tell me about your customer? And they'll give you some kind of whatever they think, kind of a high level. Our customers are X, Y, and Z, kind of high level. But when you go, let's actually dig into that. For this product line, let's look at the names, titles, industries, and companies, and any other data we know for the last 100 sales that you've made for this product. And let's find out where those came from. And when you look at that, it takes time. It takes some forensics. It's going to take you a week to probably pull that data together. Somebody full time doing that. But when you look at that answer, what you find out is radically different than this sitting in the office going, well, we have IT executives and such, Fortune, 300 companies or something like that. When you actually sit down and look at the real data, it tells you who those real people are. And you don't want to go and find new people or do something different. Look at where the core, where some of that data coalesces, and figure out, okay, if you have these 2 or 3 groups that buy this product, I now need to go learn about those people and what their pain points are, what they're really doing. And if you do that, if you really sit down and you look at the last 100 customers for any given service or product area, and you really, who are they? What do they do? What are the, did they raise their hand themselves, or did they have a boss who told them to go out and find out information? So what is their motivation for making first contact? How did they make first contact? And all those kinds of things in the industry, when you really put that all on paper, and you can do this on a grid, it's going to tell you something about those groups. And that's the thing that needs to happen. If you really want to change your organization, once you have that data and you keep going back to it and checking it, and then you use that data for all your content, for all your social, for everything, it's going to change the way you do everything.
Awesome. Steve, thank you so much for all your insights this afternoon. We really appreciate it. And wish you all the best in your continued pursuit.
Well, Jeff, I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'm really excited about your new series, so I'm going to be watching. So,
thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Have a good day.